On the Spot, where Angie, our producer, asks us questions and we have no idea what's coming.
Hey guys, what's your favorite song about friendship?
I got friends in low places.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. How about friends are friends forever if the Lord's the Lord of them?
Yeah.
Oh, you went
That's
all
the
Jesus,
first one I
Juki.
thought
Recently, we were in Boston and passed the Cheers bar, and there's a really great song about.
Sometimes you want to go.
There it is. I was waiting for Ben to sing
Where
it.
everybody
Knows your name. I went low, you went high. That was right. That felt right.
We were in the same key, though. It was
Yes.
great.
I love the Toy Story song. You've got a friend
Yeah.
in me. It just makes me
Yeah.
happy. Like if I could get up every morning and have waffles and listen to that song, it'd be a good day.
Waffles.
I don't know. I just threw that in
You
there.
never eat
I
waffles.
don't know. It just felt right.
Okay.
Okay, so what makes a great friend?
I know what you're going to say.
Oh, okay.
Loyalty.
Yeah.
That's so important to you.
Yeah, but that's not. Yes, that's true. But
What does loyalty mean? Showing up, keeping secrets, all those things?
all of that. Yes. But the thing that one of my friends that I really admire is that she is very flexible. Like she's enthusiastic,
Ooh, I love
she's
that.
flexible. And so if I were to change a plan last minute, I don't feel guilty. She's like, no, it's no problem. Let's reschedule. And so I don't have time in my life right now for people who I feel guilty when I have to reschedule something because of life. And they're like, well, man, I was really looking forward to that. And, you've kind of let me down. Like, I can't handle that.
You know my favorite C.S. Lewis quote about this? We've done this before, but friendship is born at the moment when one person says to another, what, you two? I thought I was the only one.
What is your favorite friendship quality?
That's it right there. When I feel like somebody really gets me. Like this person really gets me. They understand me. They don't try to fix me. They just know me. They accept me for who I am. And they actually like me as a person.
But when you think of your, like, one person that's a good friend, what's your favorite quality about him?
That they make me feel like a child.
I make you feel like a child all the time.
Well,
It makes
that's
you
true.
mad.
That's different. That's a little different. When I'm around a person and I just forget that I'm an adult.
But what do you admire? Like, think of your...
Fun loving.
Oh, well, that's
I
not
love-
the friend I was thinking about. That would not be his biggest quality.
Oh, you're talking about David? The thing I love about David is that he has never had a bad or good day.
He is steady. It's a steady.
Steady's
Like,
good.
yeah, because we are like, woo, let's ride the
I mean, there's only two
roller
kind of
coaster
days
of
for me.
emotions. It's high or low.
Good day or bad day.
Yeah.
David's never had either. I just think that's a fascinating creature.
Even.
He's so even. So I tend to be drawn to people who are opposite of me. So we have no idea what we're about to step into, but I kind of find like this is like one of those choose your own adventure books. Like you don't know what you're about to get into.
These were your favorite.
I know.
These make me nervous.
The element of surprise. So Angie, come on.
Okay, guys. So I've got a great topic today. And I want to say in full disclosure, this is coming from a list that we have had for a while. So we have a running list of topics that we know we wanted to talk about on the show because we've heard from you guys, the listeners, that you want to hear about these things. And so today we are tackling the subject. Are you ready?
Give it to us.
Friendships and ministry.
Oh,
Okay.
jeez.
We've got this.
Intimacy.
We have nailed this.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, guys. Okay, here we go. Should we hire our friends?
9 times out of 10, no.
Really?
Oh, I don't. That's too high for me.
9 times out of 10. I'll tell you why.
I would have gone like 3.
Okay, this is IMO, right? In my opinion,
Yeah.
I don't think I can effectively manage people that I am emotionally attached to. So my job to lead people is to say hard things to them, to coach them, challenge them. And the minute I am dependent on that relationship, I'm actually not as effective in leading them. So it's not that I don't want to be friends with the people who work with me. There's an element of friendship to that. But when I bring someone from the outside who has been a friend and I have all these treasured memories, I have to consider the cost every single time. I have to have the hard conversation. And the hard conversation is a big part of coaching. It's a big part of leadership. That's my answer.
I think that's interesting. And I want to go to what you just said, consider the cost. But first, I want to hear what you think, Lynley, about it.
Well, believe it or not, I'm actually going to be gracious with his response because I've not been the leader. I mean, to be fair, I've not actually had to have the hard conversations as the senior pastor when you hire a friend. So I did say that was too high, but when you gave the rationale, I do understand what you're saying.
And there's a second side of that too. On the gracious and mercy on the other side is that person, if the workforce knows that they were friends before, that person has to work double hard to prove themselves because it appears that they were just handed an opportunity. Patrick Lencioni in 5 Temptations of a CEO, this works for pastoring too. One of the greatest temptations of the leader is to use their direct reports as an emotional support group. And the moment you start using your direct reports as an emotional support group, you become dependent upon their support rather than leading them, pushing them, challenging them, encouraging them. So I think you can hire friends. I just think you got to be very careful about it.
Well, this came up in Nick and Meredith's interview about how they hired their best friends from California and how she was admittedly very scared about it.
Yeah.
But it's turned out to be great. I mean, that's where we talked about the what if it's wonderful. It turned out to be a great situation for them. So it does work some.
Yeah.
When you said you have to count the cost, what is the cost? What do we actually risk by hiring our friends?
Losing the relationship in the long run.
Friendship is so much more important than just work relationship. Work relationship is important, but there's a sense in which all of us need a group of people around us that, like we see in Mark 2, the 4 people that were carrying the mat of the paralytic. Everybody needs people to carry their mat. I'm not willing to lose one of my mat carriers because we don't agree about marketing or whatever. So I just think that's the cost you have to consider. Is it worth the potential of losing the relationship so you can have this?
So I ask you, what does it cost if we don't hire our friends? And your answer was about what it costs us in the friendship. What does it cost us in the workplace if we don't hire our friends? What do we lose? What do we miss out on?
3 things that I've been told you look for when you're hiring. It's character, competency, and chemistry. I think the hardest thing to find is the chemistry piece. You can find people that have good character and they're very competent, but do you really love working together? Do you have a lot of fun working together? Is there a sense of kindred spirit that brings a joy to the work? When you've known someone for years, and you know how they operate, and you know their story, and you know the good and the bad and the ugly, you know what you're getting, and you know it's going to be a good chemistry. So the thing you can't gauge when you're interviewing is how much chemistry you're going to feel when this person actually joins the team. So that's the tough thing.
This just reminded me of that. There was a reel on Instagram that we watched, and the guy essentially is trying to say that you never actually know what you're getting when you hire somebody. This guy is a very well-known business person. He said, I hired a guy after 3 interviews with all kinds of, background and talent. And he said he lasted a day. I fired him after a day. And this was like a 6-figure type salary person. And so he said, really the hardest thing about interviewing is that it hurts our pride.
Yeah.
When we interview someone and we think we've picked the right person, and everybody puts their best foot forward. So, we've had that. We've hired people and then it's not gone well, and people have made fun of us in the past. And it's hurtful because it's how you can't know. And so you can't know with that. You can't know with your friends. You don't work with your friends. And so when you hire a friend, they may be actually really lazy behind the scenes and you just had no idea. And that's the risk, because then it's scary. What do you tell your friend? Hey, you're not working very hard.
So I want to push back just a little bit on the hard conversation thing. I think it really depends upon the level of health in the leader and in the person that's working for the leader.
Absolutely. That's why I said 9 times out of 10. 1 time out of 10, this kind of friendship is the kind where it's really safe to be completely honest, and nobody's going to get defensive. But we all have emotional stuff that we carry into relationships, and I know there's certain friends, there's certain topics that I just can't bring up. It's just too hard to talk about. So if I have that rare relationship where I feel like there's a lot of openness, there's a lot of humility on both sides, there's a commitment to keep the friendship even if this doesn't work out, and that conversation's being had on the front end, I'm comfortable. And so honestly, Angie, you were one of those people. You were a friend. You were a friend before you came to work full-time with Lifeway, and I thought long and hard. I talked to Lynley about it. I was nervous about bringing you onto the team because I so enjoyed our relationship outside of Lifeway. I was afraid once we bring you in, is it going to sour the relationship? It hasn't so far. Check back at episode
Jury's
150.
out. Well, but I was contracted. I mean, we became friends through working together, which is actually
Right.
my next segue. Actually, before I segue, I want to stop right there because I thought that was really interesting what Ben and Lynley had to say about hiring our friends. And I couldn't help but want to ask Nick Floyd the same question. As we mentioned earlier in the show, Nick and Meredith Floyd talked about how Nick hired his very best friend. And so I thought, who better than Nick Floyd to talk to about hiring a friend? So let's try to get Nick on the phone.
Hey, Angie.
Hey, Nick, thanks for giving me just a few minutes.
Absolutely. Excited to.
Okay, so I interviewed Ben and Lynley recently about what it's like to hire your friends on your church staff. And it was a pretty interesting conversation. And of course, your conversation with Meredith came back up and how you just recently hired your very best friend.
Yeah,
Okay, so I've got a couple questions for you.
for sure.
Why is it worth the risk of hiring a friend?
Well, it is a risk. You said it well. And I would say it's worth it when you know their character and when you know what they can bring to the church. And for me, I just decided it was worth the risk. And I knew him well enough to know I'm not going to have a pride issue here or a competition issue here or weirdness in any way. And it has been fantastic.
So how do you know it's fantastic? Like, I know it's fantastic for you and him, but how do you know it's working with your staff? Because we talked about on our episode how sometimes you can show favoritism to people that you've been friends with for longer. Like, do you have some kind of accountability in place? How does that work?
Yeah, I think the good thing about Ryan is the guy's name who's on our staff is honestly I call him the nice one on our staff because he's just a really pure shepherd, and I honestly I've never heard one negative thing from our staff or even murmurings from the staff, which I would if it was not going good. And Ryan is just a true pastor with a pastor's heart. And that solves so many issues when the guy is a godly man, humble, shepherd, and we have seen that come true here for sure.
Awesome. So if you were talking to some ministry leaders who are considering, maybe there's a ministry leader listening who's considering hiring a friend, what advice would you give him about that?
Yeah, I would look at the role. I would look at the role and the fit. I have some of my very best friends who I don't need to hire because I know that I don't have the right role for them, or maybe we wouldn't fit in that capacity. But with Ryan, I knew I had both the role that would fit him, and I knew that he fit with me. And those are two key things of, do I have a role that fits them? If you don't, they're going to be frustrated. And if they don't fit with you, personality-wise, chemistry-wise, alignment and beliefs and even pragmatic things, you are not going to, neither one of you are going to be happy if those things don't align.
I think that's great advice. Thank you so much, Nick.
Absolutely.
We've talked about hiring friends. Let's talk about becoming friends with people you work with. And how do you keep a good boundary there? Or do you worry about it? How do you know where the boundaries are?
I don't think we keep good boundaries. I mean, Ben and I like to work. We're that was kind of the case at Storyline, is that we didn't keep good boundaries when we were at home. We talked about the church. We talked about it with our kids. We talked about it with our friends. Because it's like when you're passionate about something or excited about something, like that's at the forefront of your mind. And so I don't know that we have great answers about boundaries with that. But in every place we've been, some of our closest friends have been those who we've worked with.
Have you seen the movie Moneyball? Brad Pitt is the manager of the Oakland A's. He refuses to ride in the airplane with the players. I think that's a bad decision. I think the players need to see the coach as a human being on the plane, being with them. But he said he can't trade them if he rides on the plane with them. And at the end of the day, he has to get the best players, and he might have to trade them. He doesn't want to have to care about them. I think that's just going too far. I think if you look at the model of Jesus, if you're trying to do a spiritual leadership model, he genuinely cared about the 12. It wasn't just all about ministry. It was about heart and relationship. So I've never been able to separate that. Like, I genuinely hurt, grieve, go through a process like a funeral when somebody I love leaves, particularly when they leave on bad terms. It feels like a total failure on my part. And I will spend a good 1 to 2 years processing what went wrong. That's the cost I'm talking about. When you really let yourself care for somebody, you put yourself in a vulnerable position. But I don't know how else to lead people. If you don't care for them, you're just using them, right?
Lynley, so you have led a ministry. You led the children's ministry at Storyline.
Correct.
And I know you had a lot of volunteers that you worked with. Were there any that you were really good friends with?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And if so, how did you keep from showing favoritism?
That's actually a good question. I probably did show favoritism more than I realized. I tend to gravitate towards people who are real with their feelings. And if somebody came in and said, man, I didn't get this done. I had a terrible fight with my husband. My kid wouldn't go to sleep last night, something like that. I mean, I just was like, oh, tell me about that, let's talk about it. And so I probably did show favoritism to those versus the person who comes in and is like, everything's great.
I have to completely disagree.
Oh, okay. Well, please do.
I think you're one of the absolute best I've ever seen at not showing favoritism. I don't think you have a pleaser bone in your body. So you would show favoritism toward people who worked hard, showed up early, and actually wanted to be there.
That's true.
Yeah.
You confronted friends at times.
I did.
About not being punctual, not wearing appropriate attire.
Oh, I did.
Yes, you did it. I feel like you were a trendsetter in that. Like, I feel like at Storyline, if there was something wrong, you would speak to it. And you lost friendships over it. Mm-hmm. But to me, were they real friendships? That's the question for me. Was it really a friendship?
If you can't have a hard word?
Over that?
I mean, that's the saying, the conversation is the relationship. Like, if you can't have a hard word with a friend, it's not a real friendship.
And maybe that's the grief process. The grief process, the reality is, I thought we were really good friends, and we probably just weren't. Mm-hmm. In the book, Strength to Strength, because I love reading books.
I do.
One of the best books I read this year, Strength to Strength. He's on a call. His son is in the car, and his son says, Dad, who was that? He goes, oh, it's just a friend. And his son says, Dad, you don't have any friends. You have deal friends, not real friends.
Wow. And
it really hit him that his son was telling him the truth, that guy wasn't a real friend. He was trying to close a deal. And so you just wonder, you have to wonder in the church, this is the hard part of being in ministry is, I probably won't know until I'm gone for a couple of years how many of these people are real friends.
What do you think people mean when they make the statement, leadership is lonely?
The picture in my mind is you're traveling with people on a journey and you come to a fork in the road and you got to go right or left. Half the people think you should go left because it looks like trees and water over there. Half the people think you should go right because the mountain view looks beautiful that way. And whatever way you go, half the people are going to question whether you made the right decision. The hardest part about being a leader is that you have to bear the weight of being wrong. And many times you are wrong. And they will throw it in your face. So the more mature people that you can trust will not do that to you. They will say, you made the best decision with the information you had at the time, and I trust your heart, and nobody's perfect. But you find out who your real friends are when you make a decision that does not benefit them and it does not work out. Mm-hmm. They will use that against you, and that's when you know this is a deal friend. This isn't a real friend. And that's just the reality of leading people. Like, you can't expect everybody to be on your team emotionally. They're along for the ride because they're enjoying the mission.
I would never say a name or give away who this is, but there's somebody that Ben and people, they speak of a guy and he says he either buys you or bullies you. Meaning, like, he builds you up, he does all this stuff for you, but if you cross him, it's going to turn into bullying.
Man.
And that, it kind of reminds me of that, like a deal friend or a real friend.
Yep.
Can we take this a little bit of a different angle? So
Yeah, go for
just
it.
talking about leadership is lonely. Ben and I have had, I told you this yesterday, Angie, that probably the best month and the last month that we've had in a long time. And we've had some breakthrough conversations. And one of those is just even at home, like speaking to the women out there, sometimes in a lot of cases, the woman is the leader. And it becomes lonely. Like when you make, I mean, this is a conversation he and I have been having. When you make all the decisions about what the domestic, what we're going to eat, what groceries we're going to buy, what the kids' clothes, what we can afford. In our case, like I do the bills, I do the vacation planning. If we're going to go out to a restaurant, I decide it. And like what the conversation that he and I had is that when I would say shared control, he thought that I was complaining like I don't have enough control. And I was like, no, I need you to share it with me. Like I want you to share it with me because I'm lonely. Because when it goes wrong, like we were just on a vacation and one day it was a great vacation, but one day just was a disaster. And, that happens on family vacations, when you're on there, when you're together for 7 days. And like one day I kind of lost my mind and I needed him. In that moment I said, I need you to do this. I need you to deal with today. Like, I need you to decide where we're having lunch and dinner because the night before it had not gone well. It was very expensive. We tried oysters. The kids were like, this is disgusting. I mean, like, and so I just felt guilty.
It was a swing and a miss.
Yeah, but it all fell on me. And so when you talk about leadership is lonely, like there's lots of ways that leadership becomes lonely. And so, I mean, I don't want the women out there to be like, man, we're only talking about pastoring. Like, I'm lonely too. What would you say?
When I think about the word lonely, I think I feel like nobody understands me. That's loneliness.
Or the person that I want to understand me is not.
The hard part about being the senior pastor of church, it really is true. Nobody there understands you. Nobody there shares that responsibility. So it's not like you can get off into a corner with this person and be like, hey, let's talk about how we're experiencing this together. Nobody's experiencing it like you're experiencing it. This is why pastors tend to have their best friends outside of their context. When they get together with a pastor from another state where they're not competing for the same attention. Well, I hate to say that, but pastors do compete. So unhealthy ones do.
Yeah, some areas.
So, but it's just, that temptation is not there when you're from South Carolina and you have a pastor friend in Ohio.
Right.
So there really is a sense of like measuring up that goes on in pastoral ministry that is lonely. I was thinking about friendship the other day biblically in terms of, I think the most beautiful picture of friendship in the Bible is Jonathan and David in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
What's amazing about that friendship that we don't talk enough about is that Jonathan thought David was a stronger leader than him. Jonathan actually says, I'm supposed to be the next king. You should be the king. You're better. I see so much potential in you. That's when you really know who a real friend is. That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't choose your friends. You can have friends, you just can't choose them because you don't have power over who sees the best in you. Over time, you will know who those people are, but you don't have the authority anymore to pick those people. They will be picked for you. And that's the part that's hard to lay down, is that everybody else gets to go and pursue and have normal friendships. You have to kind of hang back and wait and see who's going to see the David in you.
So I think what we're saying is leaders want someone at the table with them who's not going to leave, who's going to say, look, we're all human. We all make mistakes. I'm here. I'm not going to leave. And a lot of times that's because of the connection, the friendship, the connection, the trust, right? And so it is tricky, I think, because you want to build that friendship, that connection, and that trust, but you also have to be able to lead.
Lynley, over 20 years ago, when I was first called to be a pastor, the then senior pastor of the church, Phil Jett, and his wife, Marilyn, called us over to their house. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Do you remember what they told us?
Leadership is lonely at the top.
And that you won't be able to have friends in the church.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They specifically told us, like, this is going to be the hardest thing for you coming into the senior pastor role. You will not be able to have friends in the church. I still don't know how to process that.
Well, that was actually proven true in some ways. I mean, remember, so we had a good group of friends there in Jackson, and there was, rumblings behind the scenes that it was like the pastor's posse. But which was so hard because at that point, I mean, everybody's in a different season. And when that was the case. We had 4 little kids, and when you have 4 little kids, you're always around other people, other moms, like having a play date and stuff. And so you have to have friends. And so they were just people in the same phase of life as we were. I mean, they had young kids and we had young kids, and we hung out and we all clicked. And so I'm like, it really, when people began saying that, it affected the relationship, and the relationships all died. I mean, our part of it died. I think they're all still friends.
We were so naive. We went home and we were like, we're having friends.
Oh, from when Dr. Jet said that?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're like, he's wrong. But he's an emotionally unhealthy person that's been jaded. That's what we thought at the time.
Right.
But over the years, now we look back and we realize exactly what he was saying. He wasn't saying you can't have intimacy in the church, you can't have any meaningful connections. He's saying because of the nature of your position, friendship is going to look and feel entirely different than it does for everybody else.
Yeah, I still think that's hard, though, because that is like one of the things, like we did an article of pastors' wives, and one of the hardest piece of advice they've received is you can't have friends in the church. And that's not true. Like, you can have friends in the church. So, I mean, how is that different than what you're saying? You're saying that he was right.
I'm saying that by nature of the position, because you have to be the decision maker, you have to be a little more guarded in every relationship than everybody else. Because at the end of the day, you have to make the decision that's best for the church, not what's best for your friend. And so there's always that little thing there when you make friends of, is this still going to be available to me on the other side of me canceling the early service that you love?
I feel like that's the male perspective of it.
Oh, this is, you're going to make this a gender thing.
No,
I want to hear it.
It's not about gender.
Maybe it is.
I do think it's a little bit different because, like, as you know, women are not senior pastors. And so, like, the relationship it's different for women. Like, we need friends. I mean, women are different than men in regards to relationship. You know how you always say that women are emotionally immodest but physically modest versus a male who, has...
It's the opposite.
Total, inhibitions about running around a swimming pool with their shirt off. Like, they're physically, immodest but emotionally modest. They don't share their emotions. So, I mean, I do think that's a little bit different. And what I'm speaking to is like the pastors' wives who are lonely and they need friends. And, it's hard to hear advice like you can't have friends in the church. Like, you have to have friends in the church. And so I think that there are 2 different perspectives here because I'm not the ultimate decision maker. So I would I would not want a pastor's wife out here listening to this to say, like, I can't have friends. Like, that's devastating to me. They have to have friends.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode on this, but I would like for you, Lynley, just to speak to what guidelines would you put on how do you pick friends as a pastor's wife? Because I'm married to a pastor too, and I know there are times where people are telling me things because they want me to tell my husband.
Yeah, I mean, guidelines for me is not blurring the lines of what you want and why you want to be friends with me, like what you want out of the church. I really don't appreciate it when people send me a book idea to give to Ben. Like, I'm immediately going to be like, okay, we're not friends. Because that you can just send that straight to Lifeway or to Ben and don't involve me in it. So for me, the guidelines was always just the person who we just had complete friendship outside of the church. We didn't have to talk about the church. I don't like nosy people. So, for me, that was a thing with friends is that when they would say, well, how's Ben feeling about this decision? Or, what did Ben think about the business meeting the other night when so-and-so stood up and said that? There were certain people who could do that. For the most part, I just wanted it to be, hey, my kid's not sleeping through the night. What would you do? Like, we were just having conversations like mom to mom or woman to woman, or having the conversation of like, man, my hormones or something. And so like that was the differentiator for me is as soon as someone said, what does Ben think? I was like, you need to ask him. So, I mean, yes, but if it is just to say it could be a slower process, I get that.
Yep.
Okay. I want to end the conversation by you telling us a great story about doing ministry with friends.
Doug Pierce and we used to ride bikes together. He had a bike, I had a bike, and when we were in Colorado, we would...
You didn't ride a tandem bike?
No.
He had a bike and I had a bike?
Let me clarify. No tandem bikes.
Tune into the Instagram account for a photoshopped photo of Doug and been on a tandem bike?
I don't actually sit around and like miss all the moments of like sharing the stage with Doug. I miss showing up on the Ralston Creek Trail and he had that dorky bike helmet on and we would talk about Willie Pete, his favorite pastime, which was ministering to the troops. There's a sense in which like when people are in ministry with you, they do understand you like nobody else does. Like they are in the middle of it too. There's an intimacy with that. And whenever you feel loved off the field by people you work with, that's just a really pure and like encouraging kind of love. Mm-hmm. But there is also like Travis Cottrell and I, we were just so goofy together. On any given Sunday, one of us was trying to make the other one look really silly in front of the entire congregation, and it was a blast.
We were looking through some old photos the other day for something, and I saw this picture of them, and it's the staff, the Inglewood staff, standing around in a circle outside, and I think a guy was like playing taps, like one of our music guys, and I was like, "What are you guys doing here?"
And hold on, I have a Bible open. It's a funeral.
Yeah.
Travis's goldfish died.
Oh no!
So I announced to everybody that we were going to have the funeral for Travis's goldfish on the back, and we had a shovel. And I had some words prepared, and everybody struggled to keep a straight face. And that picture is like is priceless.
Well, you guys would ride the church golf cart up like the highway to Sonic. I mean, it was like, you guys are going to get killed.
We got in trouble with the facilities guy for that. Yeah, so there was just so many moments. Like, you know, your life really is made up of moments. And when you love working with people, those moments just naturally happen.
I think the same is true for volunteering. So when you were the pastor at Inglewood, I followed a good friend around, which I didn't know, but her name was Sherry Fessmeyer. She was the preschool person at Inglewood, and we just became friends. And, you know, I was trying to just learn what she was doing. I didn't even know why. I didn't know it was going to prepare me for storyline, but we were just friends. I mean, and we'd end up going to the beach. She and I went to the beach together by ourselves. She just recently came into town. I mean, it's been 15 years, and she came into town, and we had lunch, and it was like no time at all has passed. So, I mean, I think it's sad when you don't become friends with your staff. Like, you are missing out. It's a risk, but, I mean, I think it's really sad because there's some great memories we have.
Angie, you know I love Masterclass. I was telling you about this recently. I was watching Coach Krzyzewski's Masterclass on values-based leadership. And he was talking about some of his players have been like sons to him. But he doesn't really have control over that relationship. A lot of that has to do with that player's maturity. Mm. And he said this, my players know I will always tell them the truth. When we sit down, I will always tell them the truth, and I will not candy coat it. Some people can handle that level of honesty, and some people can't. Mm-hmm. So it really is on the player about whether this relationship can be more than just contractual or transactional. Can it be more than that? It depends on the relationship, which is about trust. So there have been staff members before that I've let into inner sanctum in my life, and then as it turned out, the minute I made a decision that didn't benefit them, I was stonewalled. I think that's where you really find out, like, is this a real friend, or can we disagree and keep moving forward together? That's the test of friendship. The Glass House is a production of Lifeway, produced and edited by Angie Elkins, sound engineering by Dale Sandberg, original music by Robert Elkins, photography by Rebecca McVeigh, and artwork by Heather Brzezinski. We are your hosts, Ben and Lynley Mandrell. Thanks for listening.